the voice of Kronos, the life we trade away, Achilles, afterlife, children, and the failure of modern glory. There was a time when I believed that wisdom was the accumulation of answers. I no longer believe this. Age has not provided answers. It has merely exposed the inadequacy of the questions. In the last episode, we examined the moral alibi of power. We asked how social Darwinism distorts Darwin's insight into a mythology of domination. We asked how corruption disguises itself as necessity, how capitalism can reward predation when law and conscience fail, and how religion, when captured by power, becomes not a restraint upon cruelty, but its consecration. We spoke of winners, of presidents, of billionaires, of corporations, of wars, of markets, of states that justify devastation through the language of survival, freedom, security, progress, or divine will. But today we must move from the outer world to the inner wound, because the question is not only whether corrupt men succeed, the question is what success has come to mean. What does modern man actually win, and what does he lose while winning? The ancient world understood something about glory that we have forgotten. Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greek imagination, was offered a terrible choice: a long life without immortal fame, or a short life that would be remembered forever. He chose glory. He chose the song. He chose to become unforgettable. And in this, he became the prototype of the heroic bargain, the man who sacrifices ordinary life for symbolic immortality, the man who exchanges years for remembrance, the man who chooses to live briefly, violently, magnificently, so that his name may survive his body. Modern man still pursues glory like Achilles. Not always on the battlefield, though battlefields remain. More often, he pursues glory through wealth, status, influence, political conquest, professional ascent, digital applause, public relevance, and the accumulation of symbols proving that he has won. But the tragedy is this: even Achilles, from the underworld, appears to repudiate the bargain. When Odysseus encounters him among the dead, Achilles no longer speaks like a man intoxicated by heroic fame. He says, in essence, that he would rather be a poor laborer among the living than king over all the dead. There is no more severe indictment of glory than this. The man who possessed it discovered that it was not enough. And yet modern society continues to make the bargain of Achilles, but for cheaper rewards. Achilles traded life for immortal song. Modern man trades life for quarterly profit, for career advancement, for professional prestige, for a larger house, for a title, for a screen, for the fragile envy of strangers, for the illusion that one more achievement will finally justify the absence, the exhaustion, the distance from the people he claims to love. This is not heroism. It is a diminished form of sacrifice. A sacrifice not to honor, not to courage, not even to memory, but to accumulation. Here we must introduce the most severe premise. There may be no afterlife. This must be said without theatrics and without false certainty. I am not saying there is no afterlife. I am saying that honest reason cannot claim knowledge where it possesses only hope, doctrine, fear, inheritance, or desire. There may be no second world. There may be no cosmic restoration. There may be no final reunion. There may be no heavenly compensation for the years wasted, the words not spoken, the children not held, the love postponed, the forgiveness delayed, the present sacrificed to distraction. This life may be all, not as nihilism, as moral urgency. If there is no guaranteed afterlife, then time is not a waiting room before eternity. Time is the substance of life itself. To waste it, therefore, is not merely inefficient, it is metaphysical negligence. If this is all, then the evening beside one's child is not secondary to ambition. It is life itself. If this is all, then the hand held in grief is not sentimental excess. It is among the highest realities available to us. If this is all, then love does not become meaningless because it ends. It becomes more sacred because it can be lost. And yet modern man intellectualizes time away from what he claims to love. He says he is building a future while absent from the present. He says he is sacrificing for his family while slowly becoming unavailable to them. He says he seeks wealth in order to secure freedom, but the pursuit of wealth becomes the system that consumes his freedom. What began as a means becomes the master. What was supposed to liberate the mind becomes the cage of endless acquisition. This is the central contradiction of modern society. Man once sought wealth so that he might become free enough to think, create, love, contemplate, and cultivate the soul. Instead, he became a collector of material signs. He mistook possession for depth, accumulation for meaning, busyness for purpose, optimization for wisdom, visibility for significance. He filled his house while emptying his life. He purchased comfort while surrendering presence. He gained objects and lost hours, and hours, unlike objects, cannot be recovered. This is where the logic becomes merciless. If there is no guaranteed eternity, then time with one's children is not a sentimental concern. It is a rational priority. If consciousness is temporary, then attention becomes sacred. If memory fades, then presence matters more, not less. If death is final, then love is not weakened by mortality. It is intensified by it. The tragedy of modern life is that man behaves as though he will have another life in which to repair this one. Another season, another conversation, another childhood, another chance to become gentle, another chance to be present, another chance to say what pride, fear, ambition, or distraction prevented him from saying. But childhood does not wait. The body does not wait. Age does not wait. Death does not wait. Time does not negotiate with regret. When I was young, I imagined existence as a problem awaiting resolution. I believed that beneath the noise of history, beneath war and religion, beneath love and grief, beneath ambition and fear, there existed some hidden architecture, some final principle, some immutable truth that, once uncovered, would render the confusion of life intelligible. I pursued this belief with the arrogance of youth and the sincerity of a pilgrim. I carried it through deserts and cities, through battlefields and university halls, through the arms of women whose names I sometimes remember, and through the faces of children I will never forget. I believed that if I observed carefully enough, suffered deeply enough, loved fiercely enough, and endured long enough, the universe would eventually reveal itself. Instead, I grew older, and the questions remained. The answers changed. The questions remained. That is the first thing age teaches. The second is that nothing remains. Not beauty, not strength, Not certainty, not grief, not joy, not love, not even the self, especially not the self. The greatest illusion ever perpetrated upon humanity is the notion that we are singular beings moving continuously through time. We are not. We are civilizations of memory inhabiting a temporary body. The young soldier is dead. The ambitious officer is dead. The husband is dead. The lover is dead. The father holding a newborn child in trembling hands is dead, yet somehow they remain. Layered beneath consciousness like geological strata beneath a mountain, each version buried, each version preserved, each version speaking in a language only memory understands. The older I become, the less linear time appears. There are mornings when an event from 40 years ago stands before me with greater clarity than yesterday. A scent, a voice, a particular quality of sunlight entering a room, the sound of laughter from someone long gone. Entire decades collapse into a single moment. The dead return, not as ghosts, but as certainties. Memory is not an archive. Memory is weather. Memory is tide. Memory is a sea that erodes every illusion of permanence while somehow preserving the smallest fragments of what once was. The young believe memory serves the living. The old understand that often the opposite is true. As a young soldier, I once wandered through an abandoned cemetery hidden among the trees. The graves were old, older than memory. Children lay there. Infants. Mothers. Fathers. Entire universes reduced to weathered stone. I remember reading the inscriptions. Beloved son. Beloved daughter. Taken too soon. Forever remembered. The declarations struck me as tragic. Not because the dead had died. Death had ceased to surprise me long before. No. What troubled me was the silence. No visitors, no flowers, no descendants, no evidence that anyone remembered these people at all. Once they had occupied the center of someone's world. Someone had loved them with a devotion beyond language. Someone had prayed for them, feared for them, mourned them, yet there they rested beneath the indifferent passage of centuries. At the time, I believed I had discovered a terrible truth. That nothing mattered. That oblivion was the final verdict upon every life. That Achilles and the forgotten infant shared the same destination. That glory and anonymity were merely different roads leading to the same darkness. Years have softened that conclusion. Not because I found religion. Not because I discovered hope. Not because I became sentimental. But because I eventually realized that permanence and meaning are not synonymous. The rose does not become meaningless because it withers. The symphony does not become meaningless because the final note fades. A sunset does not become meaningless because night follows. Things matter because they happen, not because they endure. This is the logical error of nihilism. Nihilism says that because nothing lasts, nothing matters. But that conclusion does not follow. It confuses duration with value. A thing does not need to last forever in order to matter. A meal can nourish without lasting forever. A song can move the soul though it ends. A child's laughter can be real though the sound vanishes. Love can matter even if death eventually silences both lover and beloved. The hidden premise of nihilism is that only what endures forever truly matters. But why should we accept that premise? Why should eternity be the measure of value? Why should the temporary be treated as inferior simply because it is temporary? Perhaps the opposite is true. Perhaps the fragile matters more because it can be lost. Buddhism understood this with extraordinary clarity. The problem is not that things pass away. The problem is that we demand that they do not. The suffering begins not with impermanence itself, but with the mind's revolt against impermanence. We want the child to remain a child. We want the beloved to remain beside us. We want the body to remain strong. We want the present to become permanent. We want memory to preserve what time takes. But reality does not submit to longing. The Buddhist insight is not indifference, it is non-delusion. To love what is impermanent without demanding that it become permanent is one of the hardest disciplines available to the human soul. Stoicism arrives by another road and finds a neighboring truth. We do not control mortality. We do not control time. We do not control whether history remembers us. We do not control whether suffering eventually reaches those we love. But we do control judgment, conduct, attention, speech, presence, the refusal to be inwardly conquered by the corruption we condemn. The Stoic does not say, do not love. He says, love without pretending that love grants ownership over fate. This is severe wisdom. It does not remove the wound. It prevents the wound from becoming confusion. Existentialism adds the final correction. If the universe does not provide meaning from outside, then meaning must be enacted from within human existence. This does not make meaning false. It makes it responsible. A promise matters because someone keeps it. A child matters because someone protects him. A memory matters because someone bears witness. A life matters because it is lived, not because the cosmos certifies it. The universe was never the audience. The cosmos was never keeping score. Meaning was never hidden among the stars awaiting discovery. Meaning emerged elsewhere, in smaller places, in fragile places, in the brief spaces between one heartbeat and the next. A hand resting upon a child's forehead. A friend carrying another through danger. A father waiting beside a hospital bed. A whispered goodbye. A shared silence. A promise. A memory. The universe need not acknowledge these moments for them to be real. And yet modern society trains man to overlook them. It trains him to seek the measurable over the meaningful, the profitable over the sacred, the visible over the intimate, the public over the true. The market recognizes his labor, his consumption, his data, his productivity, his debt, his desires, and his anxieties. But it does not recognize his soul. It cannot. The market has no category for the hour he should have spent with his daughter. No balance sheet records the bedtime story he did not read. No quarterly report measures the cost of a son who learned not to ask for his father's attention. No algorithm mourns the silence that grows inside a house, where everyone is connected and no one is present. This is why the modern cult of accumulation is spiritually grotesque. It asks man to exchange the living moment for symbolic security, then calls that exchange maturity. It teaches him to measure success by what he owns, rather than by what he has witnessed, protected, created, understood, or loved. It produces not citizens, not philosophers, not fathers, not mothers, not creators, but consumers trained to confuse acquisition with existence. The question, then, is no longer merely economic. It is ontological. What is a life for? If the answer is only wealth, status, competition, and distraction, then modern society has not defeated nihilism. It has industrialized it. It has taken the terror that nothing may endure and answered it with shopping, spectacle, careerism, entertainment, ideology, and noise. It has filled the void not with wisdom, but with inventory. Here the child returns as the final moral witness. Children are the point at which every abstraction collapses. A political ideology can rationalize war. An empire can rationalize conquest. A market can rationalize exploitation. A religion can rationalize sacrifice. But a suffering child resists abstraction because the child represents innocent vulnerability prior to ideology. The child is not a theory. The child is not a nation. The child is not a market actor. The child is not a theological category. The child is an immediate moral fact. And any system that requires the suffering of children in order to preserve its own ambition stands condemned. For years, I believed I had become hardened. War encourages this illusion. Leadership encourages this illusion. Experience encourages this illusion. One learns to discuss suffering in numbers because the alternative is paralysis. One learns to speak of casualties, refugees, displacement, collateral damage, as abstractions, as categories, as statistics. But statistics never wounded me. Individuals did. I remember a father carrying what remained of his daughter. I remember the blanket first. Memory chooses strange things. The blanket was old, synthetic, worn thin by use. The blood was bright red, far brighter than I expected. His daughter's foot protruded from beneath the fabric, small, impossibly small. The father approached me, carrying a grief so complete that language had abandoned him. His eyes asked a question before his mouth ever could. Help. Do something. Save her. Save me. Save this. And I could offer nothing. No wisdom. No authority. No rank. No philosophy. Only helplessness. This was war, and I, the soldier, did nothing, could do nothing. But I remember. Years later, I sat watching images from another tragedy unfolding far away. A boat, families fleeing toward hope, water swallowing certainty. And there on the screen lay a small boy face down upon a shoreline, his shoes still fastened, his tiny hands at his sides, as though he had simply fallen asleep beside the sea. I cried, not as a soldier, not as an analyst, not as a student of history. I cried as a human being, and in that moment, I understood something that had eluded me for decades. The mind can analyze a war. The heart cannot analyze a child. Perhaps that is why my own children remain the great failure of my enlightenment. Or perhaps they are its final lesson. I have accepted mortality. I have accepted uncertainty. I have accepted that civilizations become archaeology and names eventually disappear. I have accepted that one day my own name will be spoken for the final time. These truths trouble me very little. What troubles me is the thought of suffering finding its way to my children. What troubles me is knowing that no amount of wisdom can protect them from becoming fully human. No philosophy can spare them grief. No insight can shield them from loss. No father can stand between them and life forever. I have spent decades studying detachment. Yet there they remain, the immovable center around which every abstraction collapses, the great humiliation of my reason, the great contradiction of my philosophy. If enlightenment requires indifference, I have failed. If wisdom requires detachment, I have failed. If peace requires surrendering attachment, I have failed completely. And standing here at the edge of my life, I no longer regard that failure as a defect. I regard it as evidence that beneath every philosophy, beneath every religion, beneath every empire, ideology, and abstraction, there exists something older, something more fundamental, a stubborn refusal to become indifferent, a willingness to suffer for what we love, a willingness to love despite knowing the cost. This is why the modern pursuit of glory must be judged so harshly, not because ambition is inherently evil, not because wealth is inherently corrupt, not because excellence is a sin, but because modern ambition so often requires the sacrifice of presence. It asks man to postpone the real in order to pursue the symbolic. It asks him to exchange intimacy for visibility. It asks him to treat his family as the reason for his absence and then call that absence love. It asks him to become Achilles for a world that no longer even knows how to sing. And at the end, if he is honest, he may discover what Achilles discovered among the dead, that glory is a poor substitute for life. So what is the corrective? Not despair, not retreat, not hatred of the world, not contempt for work, discipline, achievement, or creation. The corrective is hierarchy. One must know what stands above what. Wealth must serve life. Work must serve love. Ambition must serve meaning. Technology must serve attention. Politics must serve the vulnerable. Religion must serve compassion. Philosophy must serve lucidity. And no abstraction must be permitted to stand above the suffering child. This is the order modern society has inverted. It has placed markets above families, glory above presence, productivity above contemplation, ideology above mercy, power above innocence, winning above wisdom, and accumulation above life. Against this inversion, one must recover a harder and simpler truth. A child laughing in the next room is more real than the market. A hand held in grief is more sacred than status. A quiet hour honestly lived is worth more than a decade sacrificed to vanity. The soul is not saved by accumulation, and if this life is all, then the moral demand upon us is not weaker. It is absolute. Not revelation, not salvation, not immortality, only this, that for a brief moment between two eternities of darkness, I was permitted to witness existence, to stand beneath ancient stars, to watch empires rise and disappear, to love a handful of people, to lose some of them, to remember others, to ask questions for which there are no final answers, and to stand before the mystery without looking away. If there is wisdom in that, it is a weary wisdom, not triumphant, not certain, merely grateful, grateful to have been here at all, grateful to have loved, grateful to have suffered, grateful to have wondered, and grateful above all else that this fleeting and impossible experience we call life happened at all. Closing. Let nations explain themselves. Let empires write their histories. Let theologians defend their doctrines. Let markets justify their appetites. Let politicians wrap cruelty in flags and scripture. But place before them the body of a child, and every lie becomes visible, because the child is the final witness. The child is the question no empire can answer. The child is the argument against every system that requires innocence to bleed so that power may continue calling itself necessary. This is the voice of Kronos, remembering what once was, remembering what will be, and refusing, even now, to become indifferent. May we one day agree that children are not collateral, not strangers, not statistics, not enemy blood, not foreign burdens, not sacrifices to the ambitions of men. They are the purest element in the universe, and any civilization that forgets this has already begun to die. Before you leave, please help strengthen the channel. Like this episode, if it gave you something worth thinking about. Subscribe to Voice of Kronos for more work on philosophy, myth, psychology, and the human condition. Leave a comment below with your strongest agreement, objection, or question. This channel grows through serious thought, not passive consumption. Share the episode with someone who still believes ideas matter. And watch the next episode on screen. Support the signal. Like, subscribe, comment, share.